Hi, friend. Welcome to Perfectly Imperfect Life Coaching. I'm Tanya Gill. Our mission is for you to use the trifecta of joy, awareness, befriending your inner critic, and raising your vibe to step into the juiciest self-love you deserve, to feel empowered and trust yourself to live life juicy. Thanks for joining us, and I cannot wait to connect. If you would love a free gift from us, head on over to www.freejoybook.com, www.freejoybook.com, and we've got a great gift for you. Thanks for joining us. All our love. Mwah.
Got it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Good. Oh my God. Dr. Jody Carrington. I want to call you Jody. I want to call you JC.
You call me all the things. Tell me everything. How did this podcast start? What's happening? Where are you? Give me the goods.
Oh my God. Okay. So can I rewind, please? Because I'm having your Elizabeth Gilbert moment. Okay.
Ah,
I am.
amazing. I love it.
And the reason I'm having your Elizabeth Gilbert moment is because I remember seeing you on the stage in Lethbridge, and you were on fire, and you cussed, and you inspired, and you were energy, and you were love, and you were presence. And I was like, I used to say when I grow up, I want to be Brene, because I'm a social worker, right?
Yes.
And so and this is the amazing thing, right? In my past life, I was a teacher.
Yes, no way.
And then I was a social worker. In the meantime, I sold vibrators and raised my children as a widow. So shit happened. Okay, right? But then I became a social worker, and I left children's services and decided to go into private practice. And your mission is about connection. And my mission is about self-love.
Yeah.
And when I read your book, and I mean, I've always been, I'll just be honest and say, I've always been a Jody fan. Like, I'm one of those. I love your authenticity. I love how you show up in the world. And I love your message. Kids these days, teachers these days, I know that your message is one of inspiration and hope, but you don't shy away from the shit. And that's how I feel too. So I started a podcast, Jody. This is so crazy. I started a podcast last March, and it was called Wake Up and Unstuck Your What the Fuck.
Wow.
And then I realized that a lot of people were pretty turned off by the what the fuck. So I was like, okay, you know what? It's about the trifecta of joy, which is awareness, befriend your inner critic, and raise your vibration. And that's the journey to self-love. And so reading your book, I was like Jody, I mean, it's so many times I'm like, oh my God, shared response of walking each other home. And like, the job of tiny humans is to lose their friggin' minds. The job of big people is to simply walk them home. And like over and over again, I'm like, there's everything in here. And I'm like, and then when I reached out and you said yes, I was like, I had a huge what the F moment. I was like, who the hell am I to interview you and to be able to share you with the world? And yet I'm just so grateful to be able to share you with the world.
Oh, Tanya, you're awesome. Are you in Lethbridge right now?
I am. This is
That's home. Yeah.
Home. I'm in. Yeah.
Nice. Amazing. Okay, well, let's do it. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm excited too. Okay. And so, we also have like a lot of history because Billy Bob's, I grew up in Bentley.
Oh, no way.
So even when you're talking about Billy Bob's, I was like, oh, sister.
Did I spin a few yarns in the Bobs, William and Roberts?
William and Roberts, right? William and Roberts. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, my friends, I have the extreme privilege of sharing Dr. Jody Carrington with you. Dr. Jody Carrington. See, I'm so like nervous that I'm tripping over my own words. I mean, okay, I'll read your bio because your bio is super badass. Dr. Jody Carrington is a renowned psychologist sought after for her expertise, energy, and approach to helping people solve their most complex human-centered challenges. Their most complex human-centered challenges. Jody focuses much of her work around reconnection, the key to healthy relationships and productive teams. I can't wait to talk about that, some of that stuff right away. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and leader of Carrington and Company, and she uses her badass humor, a little bit of cussing, and her 20-year career as a psychologist to empower everyone she connects with. And this is exactly the truth.
Aw, 10, yeah.
I'm not
Let's
done.
do it.
I'm done.
Oh, people don't care. Let's just jump into it. People don't
No,
care.
because I need to just say that your latest book, Feeling Seen, needs to be on people, like it needs to be on bookshelves, and it needs to be on bookshelves with the trifecta of joy.
Yes.
But I am telling you, this book, like the last chapter, I felt like you were like I was crying. So let's get into it. My love.
Okay,
First
let's
of all,
do it.
what motivated you to decide that this was needed in the world right now?
Well, I think that, so much of what I wrote in Kids These Days and Teachers These Days was the starting point to really sort of the big umbrella to it all, right? And so how do we take this message? Because it was interesting. I was 10 years at the Alberta Children's Hospital and working with kids and trauma, and I spent a lot of time with police officers, and the parallels between police work and trauma and kids, growing up in, surviving or, even contemplating multiple generations of abuse, neglect, and trauma. I would speak to those groups and use the exact same slide deck. And so we started to talk about, like, gosh, whether we're talking to farmers or, female entrepreneurs or, people trying to navigate kids with big emotions, it's all the same fucking deal. And so Feeling Seen really was like, how do we take that thing that seems to be resonating with police officers and teachers to sort of make this like, okay, what is this really about? What does this world need right now? Regardless of age, race, religion, socioeconomic status, gender identity, what does it need right now? And it really is about feeling seen. And so that it was during the pandemic, and HarperCollins, actually, we got a meeting with them, which is really tricky as a self-published author. And they were like, hey, would you write a book for us? And I was like, fuck, let me check my schedule. Yes.
Yes.
And their request was really for a book that would be more sort of universally available to people, that, we could put it in airports and Costco and, those kind of things. And they're like, what do you think would resonate right now? And I was like, we need a roadmap on how to reconnect in this disconnected world. And they were like, do you think you could do that? And I was like, listen, here's the pitch.
I've been doing it all along. All I need to do is put it into words.
Yeah, exactly. So like the turnaround was really quick. And so it was remarkably difficult to sort of pull it together, I think, in this short period of time. But I like, I knew it in my bones, right? And so it was just like, how do we just get it out on paper? And then just some remarkable people like Sarah Adamanko Ansa, who is a teacher in residence at the Canadian Human Rights Museum. She was really instrumental in one of the, you know, the chapters on racism and trauma, and then everything else was just so cool, like just hockey stories, you know, like the hockey mom up the street, how we got into it, and then, you know, Asher losing his best friend who happened to be 93 years old, and, you know,
Oh,
like just shit like that. It was so fun to put those experiences in the book.
oh, yeah, yeah. So, okay, let's go back to to Asher for a second and his 93 or 92.
I can't remember how old Bill was, 92
Okay.
maybe. Yeah.
Old Bill. Okay, so to the story of Old Bill. Okay, so I, first of all, what I love so much about Feeling Seen is that the timing of it is really important.
Mm.
You know, you wrote this book during the pandemic, but now that the pandemic is, and I'm going to use very big air quotes, over, okay? Now that the pandemic is over, or we are learning how to live in a world with a pandemic, there is a lot of space now where connection seem a little more uncomfortable or a little bit harder. And so what you know, the thing that I appreciate so much about your book is that it's really not as complicated as we want to make it seem.
Mm. Isn't
Right?
that true? Yeah. And I think, like, here's the interesting thing to me, right? Is that despite the fact that we're neurobiologically wired for connection, like we will never ever automate relationship, the hardest thing we will do is look into the eyes of the people we love. And so it's this really interesting fucking, I don't know what it is, like it's like this interesting irony, if you will, of we need it now more than ever. However, our ability to escape from it, the exit ramps, you know, the phones and the sinking into the iPads, and, you know, we live in bigger houses, and now we're really normalizing working from home, makes all of this stuff that we need so desperately even less and less accessible. And the less we do it, the less we get practiced at the nuances of, you know, social interactions and handling hard conversations and really reading each other's nonverbal, you know, sort of responses if we don't spend time together. And so we're really in this crux, I think, of, you know, what I think is going to take, you know, the biggest, I don't even know if it's going to be powerful enough, but it is the mental health crisis that is gripping all of us. That is going to be like the biggest sort of pullback to, like, what do we do about this? Because I think that we're so sad when we watch our people, you know, disappear from us. And when we feel like we've disappeared from ourselves a little bit, like, who am I? What do I want? You know, is this life worth living for me? And I think that nothing can replicate truly being seen by another human being. When you have been seen by another, it is like the greatest drug. It is the greatest sort of, I don't know, motivation. It's the feeling of like just undeniably getting got. You know, it often happens without words. It's this sense of like, huh. And I think, you know, it's strung together by empathy. But the prerequisite to feeling seen is you have to be emotionally regulated. So the work actually starts with you and me doing the next best right kind thing if we really want to reconnect the world. This is nobody's job other than you and me, right? Like no senior leader is going to come up with some great shit. No policy or program is going to be the answer. It's you and me stepping into just simply next best right kind thing. Waving at your neighbor, giving your kid a compliment, looking in the mirror and being like, you know what, bitch? 47 is not so bad. You know, how do we sort of get back into this space of knowing that we each bear a massive responsibility, I think, to fight the desire to just shrink from each other. And some of us will be better at it than others. And I think those of us in a position of privilege, I mean, I always talk about this. I started on third base. I mean, it's easy for me to say these things. White, straight, able-bodied, money. And so I better fucking use it. And that was the whole premise of, you know, feeling seen. I can't tell my kids how to be better or anti-racist. I have to show them.
Right. And that's the power, right? Like I talk about the legacy of self-love. And I think that this is exactly what you're talking about, right? Because we absolutely have to show them. And it starts with you and me. It starts with how we feel about ourselves, and it starts with how we interact with the world. And so if we're living in a world where we want to stay tied, to our wagon of shit and bitter and miserable, then what are we putting out to the world? And as we, because we're all lights, right? I mean, you talk about it in your book about the difference between religion and spirituality, right? And at the end of the day, we're all lights, we're all connected, we're all love and light, and we're hardwired for connection. And so if we're hardwired for that connection, where do we go? How do we create that? And you very simply say, just start noticing, building that awareness, right? Start paying some attention to your life around you and the relationships in your life that matter.
Yeah. And don't you think that's becoming more and more challenging? Like, I love, even as you say this out loud, it's like, some people I feel like are in such a place of overwhelm that it's like, God damn it. Like, why can't people just do it for me? Why do I always have to be the one to start it? Right. Don't you hear women say that all the time? Particularly, this is what gets me is that, highest rate of suicide in our province, in our country, is middle-aged men.
Yep.
And the answer, I think, to so much of this is the role of women who are exhausted and almost resentful in some ways to have to be the emotional wherewithal for so many things and so many people. And so I feel like it is this mammoth ask. And, you can't address what you don't acknowledge. And so I think we have to start in this place of like, it's going to be fucking brutal because you're not going to feel like you want to do it. And so much of it comes into this place of like, you will end up getting more from this than it will feel as though you're giving away.
And making space for yourself. Yeah. Like it amazes me. It amazes me. Like, and I love, I mean, again, there's so many things in their book that I don't, but it amazes me how in your book, you talk about breathing and being and having conversations with your people, whether they are in person or in spirit. Because your dear, how do you say her name? Rhea?
Rhea. Yeah.
Your dear Rhea, you stood on that balcony after that rock star day and you were like, I fucking did it. I fucking did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was amazing.
And like my first husband passed away 15 years ago. And I have conversations with him every day too. And yeah, and like I celebrate with him too, right? And so, that beautiful connection that we can have it in our own lives and with spirit. And I want to bring that back to the fact though that we often don't give ourselves any space for that. Like we talk about meditation, and then people are like, oh, like, and I was one of those people, by the way, who's like, I don't meditate.
Me too.
I'm too busy. I like to move. I'm too busy. I don't meditate. Well, like you said, drop your fucking shoulders.
Yeah.
Bring your tongue off the roof of your mouth and take some breaths.
Yeah.
Just be where the hell you are.
Well, and I think so many times, like, okay, so tell me what you think about this, because I think that so often there is this expectation that we need to be doing more. Like, so you need to take another course, you need to work out harder, you need to like do the work around self-growth. And we often, like, when we want to date somebody or marry somebody, we're like, oh, she hasn't done the work or he hasn't done the work. And I think that there's really this misunderstanding that so much of what we need is already done, right? Like it is not that we don't have the ability to be remarkable humans. It's that we lose access to it. And so much of the deal is, how do we get back to it? Not recreate it, but how do we get back to those things like intuition and connection to the best parts of, knowing how powerful we are in regulating our own communities and our own children and our own partners. And once we recognize just how powerful we are in that way, and like, I think it's like so true about, you send somebody a compliment, a text message with a compliment today, or just watch what happens at some point today before you go to sleep. Genuinely look at somebody, whether you know them or not, and identify something about them that that you love. And ideally it's a trait, not a thing, but I'll take either. If it's like, I love your sweater, is usually not as powerful as like, your kindness just radiates when I step into this room. I'm so glad you're here today. Right. That single-handedly can alter the trajectory of not only day, but it can save a life. And when I think about looking for motivation to get out of bed in the morning, I think like, fuck, I don't have to do anything different. I just have to do that a little more often, and I will be better for it. And my children are watching. Like, you can't tell your kids how to be great, or you can't tell your people, your partner. You have to show them. And you don't have to show them all the time, because you're going to fuck it up. You're going to get tired. Like, let's drop the bar here. And that's my whole excitement about being alive in this season, despite the fact that we're in smack in the middle of a mental health crisis and people are fucking exhausted, is that the bar has never been this low. Like, if you want to be successful, the good news is the bar's pretty fucking low. You just got to be nice.
And you got to be nice to other people, and you got to be nice to yourself.
Boom, boom.
Right. And when you do that, it does. It's like you said, it's the switch, it's the serotonin. And like, people refer to me as like a fairy, because when I go out, I'm one of those people who is like, if I'm walking down the mall, I'm not a mall person, just so we're clear, I'm not. But if I'm walking down the mall and I see someone who's got like great shoes, for example, I'll be like, I love your shoes. Or at the checkout, if I've noticed that cashier has really gone to extensive lengths to do beautiful makeup, I say things like, I love your makeup. It's beautiful. And those moments of feeling seen, you really never know. And like you say that feeling seen you never know if it's going to change a life. And I always I put it in my book too, but I say, like, you never know the impact a single conversation can make.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, when I was a teacher, the kids would come to my classroom. I was teaching high school at the time. The kids would come to my classroom and hang out at lunchtime. Yeah. And they would hang out just to be.
Mm-hmm.
They would hang out because they knew that they were in a safe place, that they were being held, and that there was someone there for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just a safe place to hang out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know from ACEs scores, right? Adverse child experience scores, that it takes one caring adult.
Mm-hmm.
It helps if there's a hell of a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it takes one. So you never know when you show up for another human being, what impact you're making.
So true. So true. And I think that's just the thing, is that, like, we often get overwhelmed by this, like, oh my goodness, the weight of the world is so big. And, like, oh, I wish I had the time or the money to start a nonprofit. I wish, like, why can't I do this and run whatever? But the thing is that, like, we get overwhelmed by, the constant inundation of, social media ideals and news, bombardments of the things that, are going so terribly, that it really, I think, demoralizes so many people. And there's a paralysis that happens in being able to sort of do anything, because it all feels futile. Like, what's the point, right? Well, how much of a difference is this truly going to make? And I think that is like the scariest thing, because it is really, when you notice that futility setting in, it becomes really difficult to sort of, want to even do the next right best kind thing. And so we do nothing. And then the cycle continues, right? And so, I mean, there's so much around the theory of change and motivation that really is embedded in the truth of all of this. It really is like, just do it. Just do a little thing today and a little thing tomorrow. And that's how we get somewhere. You know, like James Clear's Atomic Habits, you know, is
Right.
really about like, listen, if you set your course, you start from Toronto or whatever his example is, and you set your course just like 2 millimeters to the left, you're going to end up in a completely different place than, you know, if you fly in a straight line. And I think about that often, right? It's like, gosh, it doesn't have to take much. If you don't got a lot left in the tank, listen, welcome, because this, if you do, oh my God, look out, then we need you. But if
Right.
you are the one sort of running on fumes, like, listen, you're in good company.
And it is 1% change. Like
Mm,
that's why I say motivation is bullshit, but momentum is magic, right?
I love that.
Motivation is that like hard start. It's that Monday diet. It's that you
Yes.
know, that grind. And I think that, you know, we lose motivation very, very quickly, especially when we're already overwhelmed, exhausted. We feel like, you know, we think about 10 spoons and then we realize we've got a back pocket full of spoons too, because we're serving so many people. And
Yeah.
so, you know, like momentum is stepping into what's next.
Right.
And wait, and this, oh my God. Wait, I got to find the page. I should have flagged it because when I read it, I laughed out loud and I was like, "See, I'm not the only one." And it
Ah,
the subtitle is Balance is Bullshit.
mhm.
Balance is bullshit. And I like Jody, we have a world, like you say, we're in a mental health crisis. We have people who are overwhelmed, who are stressed, who are feeling, some people are feeling like, what's the fucking point? And,
Yeah.
and, and then they somehow think, I just want to create balance. And it's like, and even as I say it, like my own body reacts, like I'm like, you're setting yourself up. You're setting like
Well, and
step
it's interesting because we've had a lot of, yeah, sorry. We've had a lot of conversations with the team lately, and it was like I almost wish I would have added a word to that, because it's like achieving balance is bullshit. Because the desire to sort of try and, you know, like get this and give it a lot over here, not a lot over here, it's like that's the bullshit part, is that, like, you know, we're always constantly striving to sort of do a little bit and not too much, but it's like the achieving of it and the expectation that, you know, like I think even in the world of business, we've long talked about like the work life balance, and you know how you sort of have to keep a foot on both sides of those things. I think that's always true, but achieving it isn't the end game. Like, you don't sort of be like, ha, I figured out the formula. This is how I, you know, teach my children that you can be a mom and you can balance all the ideals of motherhood. And then also you can just step into the boardroom after you've baked cookies and dropped everybody off the fucking school, and you look good in your Spanx, and then you just like do the things, you know, like you, that's not what we're talking about. We're one generation out of the ideals that our mamas all sort of sunk into. And some of the most powerful women in my world are my ancestors, my grandmothers, you know, who lived very traditional ways. And so we're one generation into sort of really debunking, being a disruptor of the traditional roles, and it's not going to feel comfortable, and there'll be nothing about it that is balanced, because it's all, achieving that has always been bullshit, but even more so now as we rewrite um rules.
Well, and that's exactly it. The rules are being rewritten for women in these generations that we're in right now, right? I mean, the rules around our roles in our homes, our roles in our communities, our roles in business, all of those rules are getting rewritten. And we're also feeling safer to speak our truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Some of us are, particularly as white women, but like I think, you know, that's the thing that I always got to be reminded of all the time, is that we even get the we have the ability to do podcasts, we have the ability to take, you know, seats at tables. And I think sometimes it's like, as hard as it is for somebody in a position of privilege, I can't fucking fathom, and actually I can, I just don't want to, but the idea of like just the inroads of people who have built this before we got here, you know, like I just think it astounds me every single day.
It is astounding. It is astounding. And then it's about the legacy, right?
Yeah.
What is
Yes.
our opportunity moving forward? So I have to tell you, Jody, this is the coolest part. This is what I love about having a podcast is I get to talk to and have amazing conversations with really cool people. And before you, I spoke with a woman by the name of Gloria. Gloria was my Uber driver when I was in Dallas last time. Okay.
No way.
Now, Gloria's story is so unbelievable. She originates from Ghana. When she was 9 years old, she was told she was moving to the United States. She arrived at the United States and was literally dumped with a woman and her boyfriend and told, "This is your mother." And
What?
and then she ended up experiencing a lot of tremendous abuse in that.
Dynamic. Oh, my heart.
And you know, though, what is so beautiful about Gloria is that she, first of all, recognized that she wanted a life that was different from what she had grown up in and saw the possibilities. She also had influential people in both
Yeah.
her church life and in her school life. We did a shout out to 3 badass teachers who helped her graduate. And
Oh,
and now she's a nurse and she drives Uber for extra money, and she's pregnant with a baby girl. And so
and
like,
that's how you met her? Oh my God.
I know, but this is the thing. Okay, but this is what we're talking about, Jody. Like, when we show up with the acronym I use is HELP: honor, empathy, love, and presence.
Yeah.
When we show up that way, people feel seen. And that's what your book is. And I'm like, sister, like, oh my God, like, you are far more articulate. And obviously you are like the PhD queen and you are Dr. Jody Carrington. And I'm like, yes, just simply yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's that experience, with that, beautiful woman. And, I often talk about Jesse Thistle, who, was so pivotal in my understanding. So he wrote From the Ashes.
Yes.
He's an Indigenous man that was raised in a system in Saskatchewan and Ontario, and is now just finishing his PhD at York. And he was homeless and in prison and, had been through all of the things. And he, so many of the stories that resonate with me are just simple ones where, he was like, sitting on the um, corner for days, hoping that somebody would just sort of give him money or, acknowledge him. And somebody knelt down and asked him his name. And he remembers, being able to just say his name out loud and hearing his name spoken by another human being, and he hadn't for months even been addressed as a person. And having somebody do that for him just really sort of was the impetus to be like, huh, there is somebody in here. And I need to honor that and be better and do better. And and then talking about all the people he met along the way, including his now remarkable wife Lucy, who together, she picked him up from jail and away they went, and they have a little girl, and like it's amazing. So it's like sometimes it's like it's not those like massive interventions, like yes, he went through this treatment program and but it was like the guy who knelt down and do we not all have the opportunity to do that on any given day? you know
Absolutely.
strike up a conversation with the Uber driver, to stop and kneel down and to have a conversation about, even if you don't have money to give to somebody else, but even in that conversation of like, tell me more, right? Asking people their name, like acknowledging somebody in the elevator, like it's such a fun game, and I
Oh
just like
God.
really love
Oh
it.
God. I love the elevator awkward. I make it a game. I get in. All right, so here's where the party is. I'm like, who brought the party favors, and like, what are we drinking, and how many floors do we get to dance? I'm that person.
Oh, that's awesome,
Well,
Tanya.
but like, seriously, Jody, like, elevator awkward. Come on. Like,
Yeah.
like it, we're in a box together. Let's acknowledge one another. Let's acknowledge that we're
Yeah.
human beings in a box together.
And like it's so great. Anand has talked about this in his research, where the only intention was in his whole platform was to get people to look at each other for 4 minutes. And it's remarkable to me how difficult that is, and even when I was like first reading the research, I was like, how hard can this be? Like I've been married to my personal husband for 15 years. Like I should be able to come home and like look at him, and like how hard can this, and he's got a PhD in feeding cows, which basically he's a feedlot nutritionist, which I'm sure is very hard, but he basically just drives around and looks to see if heifers are hungry. Okay. And so I was like, you know, this can't be very hard. And I was like, hey, I was reading this research. Can you just sit and look at me for 4 minutes? And he was like, why?
Did you get a new hair?
Why?
What am I
Like,
looking for?
excuse me. What do you mean, why? I had a lot of choices in 1993, and I chose you. That's why you're going to sit here and look at me. And I think, it's so interesting that even replicating the research in that first 30 seconds with somebody you really love, even if you know them really well, it's awkward and silly. And, you just want to make sure that the synchronicity is going to be there, that they're going to, be vulnerable if you're going to be vulnerable. And if they're not going to be vulnerable, you're not going to be vulnerable. And we get in this sort of standoff. And one of my favorite psychologists on the planet, Harriet Lerner, wrote how it is all about a dance with big emotion. She wrote The Dance of Anger, The Dance of Intimacy. And I really have always loved that concept, because it is so hard to get it right with another human being. You can stop one day and sort of ask somebody who you think needs connection what their name is, and they're like, fuck off, lady. Or you're dancing in an elevator and they're like, okay, lunatic. So it is also premised on this idea, or prefaced on this idea, that there's going to be some responsiveness there. And when there isn't, what do we do with that? Because it can really then mitigate that from ever happening. And this often happens in marriages, right? Where I'm going to try to seek your connection, and it's not going to be the time or the place, or you're not going to be open to it. So you know what? Fuck it. I'm never going to do it again. And we get in this dance of then, okay, the walls are up, and who's brave enough to break down the walls? And often we just disconnect and then look for it somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's the thing. It's being willing to step back into the dance,
Oh,
or
it's so scary.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and we are like, I mean, because we're wired for connection. If we don't feel good about ourselves and we experience what I'm going to use the word rejection. We
Yeah.
experience that rejection.
Yeah.
Like it can further fuel our fear of future connection.
Particularly if there's a trauma history on board,
Well,
or
and
if in your bones, that's your expectation of how people will respond to you, is that that the world isn't a safe place, that humans they can't be trusted, right? That you've protected so hard. I mean, the beginning of Feeling Seen, I talk about the soul. And for a long time, I've talked about emotional regulation in kids and people. But I was like, what the fuck are we trying to get back to? Like, of course, emotional regulation is a thing, and that's a really good thing. But like, is it true? And in many Eastern philosophical practices, there's a lot of talk about like the sense of self, the seed of self, like all of the core beings core parts to our beings. And I really think that that is what we try to do. And when you truly see another, that's the part you see, is the soul. But you can imagine how hard it is to get through all of the armor if somebody has buried a husband, if somebody has been told repeatedly that they're not worth it, if somebody has like been physically assaulted because of the color of their skin. Fuck you. Even when you say to me, it's safe to come out, or you can trust me, or you can fall in love with me again, not a fucking chance. Right? Because the armor is so thick. You have to work so much harder in this human relationship and connection game to be able to get back there again and again and again. And I love that challenge most of the time. I'm like, okay, you need me to prove to you? Have you met, like, and this is what I loved about the children's hospital, right? Is that like there'd be hitters and kickers and biters, and the ones that tell you to fuck off. And I got throat punched so many times I lost count. And I loved it because I understood the context, right? Context is a prerequisite for empathy. When I know that their job is to push me away enough because they didn't believe that somebody would stick with them long enough, ha! Challenge accepted. Right. And it doesn't mean that we don't tolerate bullshit. Like it doesn't mean that sometimes it'll be like, enough. No. right? Doesn't mean that everything goes, but it means that you lead with kindness, and that again and again and again and again. And it's exhausting, which is why we need our people to be able to sort of get us back in the game when we fall apart. But it really is the deal to step back in again and again and again.
And you know what, as you're talking about stepping in again and again and again, and you're talking about your hospital experiences, I remember one night, I was doing call. I had to remove a teenage girl from a situation, and she needed to be formed and she needed to be hospitalized. And she was angry as all fuck. And I kept, like, you know, I was there. I was letting her hold her anger. And the lid completely flipped, right? Completely flipped. And, you know, it's so funny, right? You talk about the snacks. I was always the one with I have a granola bar in my purse. Are you hungry? Right? Like should we hit the drive-through on the way to the hospital? Like I was that person. Anyway.
Nice.
What was so interesting though, is that she was, because, and I believe this, because I wouldn't walk away from her when she was pushing so fucking hard.
Mm-hmm.
When her and my time working together were coming to an end, she said to me, you know, you're not just a cunt, you're a thunder cunt.
Ah!
And I was like, what do you do with that? Right? Like, what do you do with that?
You say thank you.
And that was exactly it.
Oh my God, I love that.
The biggest compliment. She was like, you stayed by me like a superhero. You are a thunder cunt. And I was like, and then one of my colleagues drew me a little thunder cunt superhero. It was hilarious.
Oh my God, you need a t-shirt for sure.
Right? But it's so those are the examples though, right? Like you show up again, show up again. And especially with our kiddos, you just keep showing up again.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. That is so awesome.
I've never said those words on my podcast before.
I don't know if I've ever heard that word on a podcast before, but like I'm here for it.
And that's why I love you. You're here for it, right?
Oh gosh, that is so great. That is so great.
So you know how you talk about that 4 minutes of gazing,
connection,
and how when you and your husband Aaron were doing that, it was like an experience, quite an experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last night I actually said to my husband, like, you know, are you up for this? Do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And he's like, of course, like he's up for anything. He's up for anything. He's a university prof in health sciences, and he focuses on men's mental health and transgender health and
amazing
immigrant health, which is like also so important, so beautiful,
sacred.
So anyway, so he's like, yeah, I'm totally up for it. And then guess who fell asleep?
Wow, it was soothing.
No, I fell asleep before we did it.
What?
I know. I was like, okay, well, let's just do it like right before we go to bed, blah, 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 blah. And then, here's the thing. I'm going to blame you. All right. I'm going to blame you because I was so nervous about it. I was so, but it was like that excited nervous, like that, you know, like, like the Elizabeth Gilbert thing, like it's that excited nervous. And so,
oh my gosh.
And so this morning he said to me, he's like, yeah, we never did that 4-minute thing you wanted to do. And I'm like, we'll do it tonight. I promise, sweetheart. I
promise. Oh my God, I love it. Okay, well, I need to know how it goes.
Okay. I will let you know. I will let you know. I'll be like, oh my God, it was awkward as hell. Although, you know, actually,
so funny. Oh my gosh.
I think it will be really lovely. Okay, so I actually wanted to comment on a couple of things that you've done in your book that I think are really, really important for your readers.
Okay.
At the end of each chapter, you ask 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions, what I appreciate about the questions is that they push you to an awareness that you may not have considered before.
Mm.
And they also encourage you to stretch yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering, like, what made you decide, first of all, to put these questions in?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think that so much of the time, like even when in kids these days and teachers these days, we did this as well. And I was thinking about this, like, is this necessary when we're not talking specifically to teachers or, educators? And it was like the conversation with our editor was like totally around how do we make sure that some of these ideas stick? How do we provide a sense of like, how can you dig just a little bit deeper? How can you sort of get into this place of like, okay, just a second, did this really resonate? What did this really mean to me? And so we as a team sort of came up with, I was like, okay, what out of this chapter, what do you think really needs to be sort of hammered home? And then we would come up with some things, and like some of them are better than others, for I admittedly, but and sometimes people just, sometimes I do this, just like skip over that and want to get to the next chapter, kind of, right? But I love it when people do use this book as for a book club. And that's what I love the most about, sometimes, like, even if you didn't read the chapter fully, or it didn't resonate, or you were like fell asleep through it, or whatever the deal is, those are some of the things that can just sort of ground you back in the content, and then just sort of highlights the things that I hope that you take from each of them. So I for that reason, I just like, it's kind of a bit of a roadmap as you navigate it.
Yeah, and it's a great roadmap. It's a really great roadmap.
Yeah,
And I
cool.
think it's an especially important roadmap when we look at privilege, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I also consider myself to be a very privileged woman. I am white, heterosexual. And I live on Blackfoot land,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? I live in an indigenous territory, and
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge that. And
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge that there's so many layers of privilege that come with wherever we are in our lives, but sometimes we don't even take a moment to consider the privilege that we have.
Well, that's the definition of privilege. You don't have to.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a conscious effort, and I think that it hasn't been for so long. And like, I haven't talked about the fact that I am, despite the fact that I grew up on this, I don't know. I mean, I got a PhD in this country. I never, not one time, learned about the residential school system. I never, not one time, you know, talked a lot about, why do the people we serve in child and family services, why is, in this province, why, 10% of the kids in this province are Indigenous, but they make up 72% of kids in care. I never questioned those things, even when I served in this population, served the population. And I'm like, what the hell? And you don't have to ask those questions, right? If you've always just been the one with the answers, or taught you're the one with the answers. And that was such a big part about feeling seen for me, is that, like, yeah, so it's easy to sort of be in this place of knowing what feeling seen feels like when you've been privileged enough to have that experience, because it really is a privileged experience to feel seen. And that was the hardest chapter. There's a chapter tucked right in the middle. That was the hardest one to write. And it's the one that I get, that I'm excited, I should say, to get the most feedback on, because I know I fucked it up. I know I have so much unlearning to do. And it's just how we attract people who can teach us more is just, I think, one of the most important parts of this whole process.
And I think we have to realize that the people who can teach us more are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not and yes, I mean, I've had the privilege of sitting with elders and listening to their stories, and I mean, many of us are very familiar with the blanket exercise, and whew, what an emotional journey the blanket exercise can be
Yeah.
to understand the impact that
Is colonization. Yeah.
that is colonization, that is, racialization, which is of course a made up word. And also genocide. Let's
Yeah.
let's be kind of real. Let's just use the word that's real, and that is, it's genocide, right? So,
Yeah.
so we have an opportunity every single day to see others. Like, I mean, I live in Lethbridge. We are next to the largest Indigenous reserve in Canada. We have a large Indigenous population, and a lot of those folks come with massive amounts of trauma, with massive amounts of history, both genetically and in this life, right? Because we know that there is, like, intergenerational trauma is a very real thing. And so, like, that moment of just choosing to see and learn from whomever we can.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Is the key.
Yeah.
Is the key.
Yeah. And doing that work and checking, doing that work and checking, doing that work and checking. It's just like, yeah, it's a never ending process. And every day I just think about how lucky I am in this lifetime, but certainly in this last season. And, even the conversations that I have with our children, that is so different than in one generation that, we would have never dreamed about having around our kitchen table. Right. And it makes me hopeful some days. Like, I mean, I know that we're so far behind in so many ways. And the fact that it's happening more and more also gives me hope.
But you know what? Every conversation counts. Every time we speak up counts.
Yeah.
And every conversation counts. And what I find inspiring about the generations that are coming, and what I see in my children and in their friends and in, like, younger 20 somethings people's, is that they don't feel like they are being more authentically themselves than ever. I mean, it's not uncommon to have kids that go by they, them, or to be transgender, or to, identify as pansexual, or, there's also this space for acceptance and love for so much diversity. And that is, like, to me, that's so important too.
Yeah. 100%.
Another piece of being seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay, this book, like, seriously. So you talk through the whole book that really, when it comes right down to it, our whole job is to walk one another home. We're just here to walk each other home, right?
Yeah.
Do it again.
That Ram Dass quote, I have it hanging over my shoulder because I forget it all the time, but that really is the big why in the world for me, right? Is really, like, that's our job. And on our worst days, we're not our worst days, but on many days we're the walkers, and on other days we're the walkies. And sometimes you're doing both at the exact same time.
I love that.
Yeah. And I just think that it is the reason, right? When I get overwhelmed and I think, like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I'm exhausted. I'm on the road. We've just lost my mother-in-law, all these things. It's like, how are we going to do it? And then I start to think, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, how privileged, where's the gratitude? Where are we at in this part to understand that nobody's getting out of here alive. We're all going to be in this place of, having those moments where things fall together and then they don't. And, how do we embrace those moments becomes, I think, the thing. And if you are lucky enough to be in a place on any given day where you can sort of seek the joy. And I think that's, with respect to your book, I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is it, like, even in the front row of a funeral, there are those moments that you can string together. And happiness is so elusive because it's not a thing that anybody ever has, but we have the opportunity to find the moments of joy in any given day and string them together. And that's really why we're here, not to be happy, right? But to find those moments of joy.
Right. And it requires presence. It requires presence.
Yeah. Because remember, the most vulnerable emotion on the planet is joy. And you can't be emotionally dysregulated and feel joy. It's neurobiologically impossible.
So emotional regulation brings joy.
It's the key.
It's the key. It's the key to staying badass. It is the key.
You know what?
There's one last thing I want to read to our readers, because I just think it's is so powerful, and it's really interesting too. And you say the problem with most of us is that we want to get there yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And patience, I fucking hate that word too. It's a but reality is that what we have is right here, right now. And we talked about it earlier. It's like those one single steps every single day that make the difference, because we aren't getting out of here alive. And Gloria, the young lady that I interviewed before you,
yes.
her inspiration, she said it's so cool, because she's like, every single day I wake up, I know if I wake up, I still have a purpose on this planet.
Cool.
If I'm waking up, I have a purpose, and that means one step forward.
That's awesome.
Right? Yeah. And that one step forward, we're walking each other home.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
I love you.
I love you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you know what, Jody? Like, this has just been like so awesome. So awesome. So here's the thing though, young lady. And I get to say that because I'm 48. Yeah. So here's the thing, young lady. You have been doing a book tour, and then it looks like you're taking a little break, and then you're finishing up in Calgary, and it's sold out.
Yeah, we head to New York next week. That's our only US stop. And then we're Winnipeg, and Calgary is where we end. And yeah, we sold out every stop. It was amazing. It's been amazing. St. John's was phenomenal. Toronto was so intense. Halifax was massive. And it was just like, yeah, it's Vancouver was ridiculously fun. It was so good.
So are you thinking about opening up a second one in Calgary? Because I know
we've talked about it, and it's just like, I don't know, but you think we should, eh?
Just saying. Like because I was posting, because I've been so excited and I've been so nervous. And I mean, I got flowers from some of the women who are in one of my groups, because
I love it.
Because they know how excited and nervous and all of the things I was. And we had talked actually months ago, a couple months ago, and you were already sold out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, so I thought, you know what? I was like, I'll ask her if she's going to do another one, if she's going to do and I get it. You've got to also have boundaries, because you talk about boundaries in the book too. You've got to know your limits.
Man, I think like that's part of it for me, is that like the speaking piece has become so fantastic. It's the thing I love to do the most. And it's like, how do we make sure that we, do that, but then still have something at the end of the day, right? And the tour stops are so fulfilling, but I want people to come to feel seen. So everybody gets a book. I will stay till the last person leaves. We do, make sure, I sign, and we do photos and all those kind of things. So the tour itself has been, the most that I've ever sunk into anything on, because I'm like, if people are going to actually come and spend money to buy the shit that I write, then I mean, I'll give you everything I got. So it's been exhausting in ways that I've never felt before, but also rewarding in unbelievable ways.
What has been the greatest reward?
I think when I see my kids, just sort of ask the questions about like, okay, what was that like? Who did you get to meet? What did you get to do? Do we get to come to Calgary? They're very jacked because they get to be a part of the Calgary show. And so they're like, like what happened this time? And that's just the best part. And I travel everywhere with Marty, who is my executive director, and she, we started this whole company together, and she's so great, and she's, so we get to do all of this usually together. We were apart for 3 days in this last leg of the tour to St. John's because her plane got messed up, and anyways, long day. And I was like, this is a partner in crime situation here. I am not doing this shit alone. So I'm very grateful that we get to do this whole process together.
That's awesome. It's good to have
Yeah.
your Marty. I have my, that's so I understand.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
good.
Absolutely. I look at your, I'm going to use the word empire. I look at your success. I admire your strength, your resilience, your vulnerability.
Thank you.
And the incredible heart with which you speak, because, like, it's real fucking world.
Yeah.
And that's what matters the most, is it's real world.
Mm-hmm.
So boundaries, it sounds like you're not going to be probably having another one in Calgary anytime soon, but that is okay, because in the meantime, people can read the book.
I would love that. Share it, read it, send us your people.
Yes. And leave reviews. That's the other thing. Leave reviews. Make sure you're leaving. Please leave reviews. So, Jody, if people want to find you, where is the one place you would like them to find you?
I think everything that we do is all landing on our website. So there's courses and workshops, and the podcast. I hope we do a podcast soon, and all of those things. I always want it to make everything that we do accessible. And so we do a workshop series once a month. The next one's on raising strong girls, and the one after that is on navigating divorce. And I just wanted to make sort of mental health resources much more accessible. And we show up on social media every day, so Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all the things. Yeah.
And all the things, Dr. Jody Carrington. All the things. And it's drjodycarrington.com. Or is it?
You got it.
drjodycarrington.com. Okay, good. See, I even just had it memorized.
There you go.
This has been the most amazing conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I saw your post yesterday about getting flowers, and I was like, holy sweet Jesus, I'm gonna have to bring it today. God damn it, the bar is so high. But it was so fun. So thank you so much. I loved every second, and I can't wait to be back in the same room. Lethbridge.
Oh my God, I know. When are you coming, sister?
I do not know what I'm doing tomorrow. Okay. I just know we fly out again on Thursday. And so tonight I got to play hockey against my son's team. So a bunch of 13-year-old boys and me is not going to be something. I don't know. I'm going to go home and start stretching now.
It's all going to be fantastic.
It's going to be fine. It's good. So good.
It's going to be a good time. My friends, thank you so much for joining us with this amazing conversation with Dr. Jody Carrington, who is, as you have seen, the most authentically beautiful and heartfelt inspirer, and so committed to reconnection in a world that feels hurt and hopeless sometimes. But more than anything, she has this message around feeling seen and around connecting and the power of that connection. So go get her book and read it and fill it with ink like I did. And I've only got 2 people who want to borrow it. And I'm like, as long as I get back, because it's beautiful. And
thank you.
And then get your ass to her website and get on her mailing list and keep following her, because she's a gem. And I am so grateful to have shared space with you, Jody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Tanya. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Okay. If you loved what you just watched, share it with a friend, follow or like us, or give us a thumbs up. You can also follow us on the socials at Trifecta of Joy. So head on over and follow us there. The final thing that we would love is for you to listen to our podcast, Trifecta of Joy, on all of your listening platforms, my friend. There is so much good stuff out there for you. We are here to serve, and we're here with love. Let us believe in you until you believe in yourself.